And now, the story of the man who wanted to change everything and his 12 friends who followed him around the desert. It's Libations and Lectionaries. Christ with me, Christ before me, Christ behind me, Christ in me, Christ beneath me, Christ above me, Christ on my right, Christ on my left, Christ when I lie down, Christ when I sit down, Christ when I arise, Christ in the heart of everyone who thinks of me, Christ in the mouth of everyone who speaks of me, Christ in every eye that sees me, Christ in every ear that hears me. Hello and welcome to Libations and Lectionaries. This is our St. Patrick's Day episode, in case you didn't figure it out from the fact that I read you St. Patrick's breastplate and then played the Dropkick Murphys, shipping up to Boston. Yes, indeed. So, Ted, hi.
Hey!
And we are not joined by Caitie today. We're joined by Caitie of a different sort, but we'll get to that in a minute. Caitie Calloway had some car trouble this week, and her Subaru is on the fritz, as she put it, so it's being towed right now.
Oh, boy.
I get car trouble. I had car trouble this week. I was driving home on Monday, and suddenly a bright red graphic of a car on a service lift lit up on my dashboard, along with the word brake in bright red, and I'm like, well, that can't be good. So I took it over to Crown BMW in Greensboro, and turned out it was just a bad brake sensor. It cost me less than $100 to get it fixed.
That's good.
Yeah, and for that $100, I got to drive around in a convertible BMW 440i for 2 days. Completely impractical, very fun, and a $62,000 car.
Wow.
Yeah.
He had an audience, too, when he showed up at the house the other day. I was across the street talking to our neighbors, and he pulls up in this convertible, and they look at me and they go, recruiters make really good money.
And I'm like, no, I can't afford that car. It's like, I paid $25,000 for the X1 used. I can't afford a $62,000 BMW convertible. Are you kidding me?
Well, not until you start forging people's names on recruitment vouchers, and then
See, no, I don't get bonuses.
Oh, you don't get? No. You don't work on commission?
No.
That'd be awesome if you did that.
I'm paid salaried as an officer in the U.S. Navy. No, I have no.
That would never bite anyone in the butt.
I have no incentive to forge people's names and commit felonies. Are you kidding? I do have incentive. It's called not going to jail.
Yeah.
I mean, he recruits a lot of people for the Navy, so that would be pretty sweet.
Yeah, no.
If that were legal.
We don't work on commission.
Do they have bonuses like the person who recruits the most at the end of the week gets like a $10 gift card to Pizza Hut?
No.
Like it's a call center or something?
No. Now, if you put in 2 applications in 1 month, that's you do get a day of liberty in return, which is a day off, a paid day off without having to take leave. So if you put in 4 applications in 1 month, you get 2. It's a pretty sweet deal that our commanding officer worked out for us, and that's only for officer recruiters. Enlisted recruiters, the incentives are completely different, just because it works completely differently, and I'm not going to get into that right now. Because that's not what we're talking about. This is not how to be a Navy recruiter. This is Libations and Lectionaries.
That's the other podcast you're starting soon.
Yes, as I prepare to leave Navy recruiting. Yeah. So, how's it going, Ted?
It's going well.
Yeah.
As I mentioned to you and Caitie before we started, I'm meeting with the Council on Ministry for the UCC on this Thursday. And hopefully my 6 years of being a member in discernment will come to an end. Knock on wood, preferably soon.
That would be super.
Yeah. Hopefully no more like, we have some more hoops to jump through that we forgot to mention beforehand, and now...
No, churches don't do that.
No!
Never.
I mean, we were talking... They aren't slow and run by volunteers, and so take forever to get things done. No.
They aren't walking around with the weight of 2,000 years of tradition bearing down on their shoulders. No, not the church.
No.
That'd be great, because then at the beginning of the podcast I can introduce you as Reverend Ted Wilkinson. Hopefully soon.
And then when I officiate weddings, I don't have to get special licenses from the state. I can just be like, my ordination's my license. And then find out later I was supposed to register or something like that.
You could get an ordination from the Church of the Dude or the Pastafarians something.
I actually did the Universal Life Church years ago.
Universal Life Church of the Internet, okay.
Yes, but apparently a lot of states do not recognize that. Or it's a giant rigmarole to get around it. And North Carolina, interestingly, is one of the states that has spent millions of dollars in court suing them and will not recognize any marriage performed by them after 1982. So,
I do not understand why the government gets so up in arms about that. It's like, you are not a religious institution, state of North Carolina, or any other state. Get out of the marriage business.
Yeah.
But this is not the politics podcast. This is not Fresh Air with Terry Gross.
Oh boy. Because you aren't asleep yet when you're listening to it.
Ooh, burn!
Shots fired!
Damn, Ted!
Take that, PBS and your millions of listeners.
National Public Radio. National Public Radio, not public broadcasting.
Excuse me.
There's a difference, Ted. One's radio, one's TV. That having been said, I can do my best impression of National Public Radio voice, and I bet that you can as well. NPR is now accepting your pledges, and we will send you absolutely nothing in return. Actually, that's not true. I got a very nice coffee cup from WUNC last year. It's a double-walled 20-ounce tumbler, and it keeps my coffee hot for like 8 hours.
Nice.
It's a beautiful thing. But we're also not on Coffee Talk. This is Libations and Lectionaries, so let's talk about our libation, shall we?
Okay.
In the words of Commander Montgomery Scott in the Star Trek The Original Series, it is green. We are drinking today an Irish gin and tonic. And it's not just Irish because it's green. It's Irish because it is Irish gin. Gunpowder Irish gin made by the Drumshanbo Distilling Company in Ireland. It uses various botanicals, including, of course, the original juniper that you'll find in just about any gin. It also uses a kind of tea known as gunpowder tea. The reason it's called gunpowder tea is the tea companies that make it take tea leaves and roll them up very tightly into pellets that resemble gunpowder pellets.
Yeah.
And they use these in distilling the gin. They also use multiple citruses, lime, orange, and grapefruit all go into this gin. And then, like I said, I dyed it green.
Nice.
The tonic water did not come from Ireland. That came from Target. So,
Target brand tonic water.
It was cheap. But
it's good.
I like this gin.
Yeah.
I first tried it a while back, and I was like, ooh, that is tasty.
I find a lot of gins have a bite to it that this does not.
Yeah.
I enjoy it a lot.
Well, I think that might be because, it doesn't have all kinds of wild herbal botanicals in it, but instead the primary botanical is tea.
Yeah.
So
I like smooth gins.
Yeah. You liked that one that we had back when we did the Whiskey Around the World episode back in October that John made you with, what was it, Boodles?
Yeah,
gin,
no, I
think?
did like that one.
Yeah.
I don't remember what was in it, though.
Well, Boodles gin.
Boodles. But in terms of botanicals,
I
don't
have no
remember
idea.
what was in it.
I know it's a British gin as opposed to an American gin, so.
John can write in and tell us.
Or we can just ask his wife next time she's on the show.
What's the P.O. box that they can mail in fan letters and art? And
No P.O. box, sadly. However, you can email us anything at libationsandlectionaries@gmail.com, an email address I have not checked in nearly a year. So, look, it's on my phone. If I actually get an email, it will pop up.
So what you're saying is that you don't have a fan base because you haven't gotten emails.
I'm just saying I don't have an angry fan base.
Yeah.
Okay.
No angry comment.
Although
no
you know what?
angry
You know what I have never done? I have never checked the reviews on iTunes to see if
should,
anybody's
I know there's at least a 5-star on there.
Oh, did you put it there, Ted?
Maybe. I don't know.
I just don't know if anybody's tried to do us dirty on iTunes.
Oh, that would be interesting, actually. At least someone's listening, we know.
or they're not. They just, they saw the title and they got all butthurt about somebody combining scripture and alcohol.
Oh,
God forbid. Jesus drank. Jesus drank wine. Jesus played bartender for his first miracle, y'all.
You should put that if we are being boycotted by like the Primitive Baptists or something like that. You should put that on the cover.
Well, I mean, that's what
protested by.
That is what the very first episode that we did was about. Caitie and I, we talked about the wedding at Cana.
Yeah, and
we drank gin and tonics for that one too. Except it was American gin and a type of tonic syrup made by a distillery in Missouri. So, there is no denying that Jesus drank, and you would not believe the hoops I have seen people jump through, the acrobatics they have done trying to claim that, oh no, wine back then, that wasn't alcoholic. And it's like, are you high? The alcohol was what kept it from going bad.
Yeah.
You morons. But I'm sorry, I shouldn't call other people who claim to profess faith in Christ morons, even if they are. But hey. Oh, that took a turn. So... It's been kind of a bad week for religious folk, Friday was not a good day.
Particularly bad day, yeah.
A white supremacist walked into 2 mosques in Christchurch, New Zealand, and committed acts of terror, and 49 people died as a result of it. And make no mistake, this was not mental illness. This was not mass homicide. This was terror. This was somebody who released a manifesto in which he quite clearly stated he was inspired by a number of world leaders, including our own, to commit these acts of terror. And he did it intentionally against Muslim people who were in their house of worship, worshiping God when this happened. It's like, this dude does this at these mosques. You've got Coptic Christians being attacked in Egypt. You've got the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh. We've now hit all the Abrahamic religions in the last 6 months. It's every time it's been people who are dead set on wiping out a certain religious portion because they hate them for no reason other than they have been trained to hate them. Now, there's no scriptural, Talmudic, Quranic basis for committing these acts of terror. And I don't know. I'm kind of getting sick and tired of it. God did not tell anybody to go commit acts of terror. And I hope the guy who went and shot up the mosques in Christchurch burns in hell. And that's not a particularly Christian thing for me to say, but that's what he deserves. So, and it really just sticks in my craw that this guy would do this, not just at mosques, but at mosques in a city named for the church that we're part of. I don't know. It's like this is the kind of thing that Jesus must have been thinking when he said, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to it. And that's my very awkward segue in today's scripture, but Jerusalem was the city, supposedly the city of God in the time of Christ, and yet this is a city that had been the home of numerous corrupt kings during the times before the Babylonian captivity. This is a city that every time a prophet went there, some crazy-ass monarch was like, off with your head. I mean, Jezebel, how many prophets was she responsible for the death of in, Second Kings, I think? And it's like, it's murder in the name of religion over and over again. And then...
Well, and now religion is being tainted by Roman power, too. At this point, I mean, the lines between the religion and the government are blurry.
Well, as far as the Roman government was concerned, Caesar was God.
Right, but it's now starting to infiltrate the temple. It's already infiltrated the temple And so there's political motivation on the part of all of these different religious groups.
Sure.
That Jesus interacts with, like the Pharisees.
Yeah, because when Jesus shows up in the temple and takes a whip to the money changers who are probably licensed by the Roman government, that's going to put the fear of Rome into these religious groups in power. Or in quote-unquote power, what power Rome would allow them to have.
Yeah.
And so, obviously they're afraid of Rome. Obviously Rome influences the way the temple works. But still.
Well, Can we talk about something that I really want to talk about since I'm preaching on it?
Sure.
This passage?
Can we talk about like Jesus' choice of words and calling Herod a fox?
I was going to bring that up. I did not know that he was that attractive.
And in some translations, of course, whenever we read scripture, we're always like reading tone into it and like human emotion. But some translations, it says little fox, like you're like, oh, that little fox, like, oh shucks, like that little fox.
Do you think it's edited down? Like Jesus is like, go tell that fox with his toned muscles and long, luxurious hair.
No,
I don't.
No. I don't think Jesus was looking at Herod as a male model and offering to go out and get orange mocha frappuccinos with him or anything. But.
Well, I've been wondering, so like, whenever I get ready to preach something, I write down all my questions about the scripture that I'm preaching on. Like anything I'm confused about or anything I'm just playing devil's advocate about, I write down all my questions. And one of my questions was, why a fox? Like, why that particular animal? Like, was it an insult? Is it something about the character of what a fox is? Like, why a fox? Like, I don't know. I've been really stuck on that question. Why a fox?
I think, you think about a fox, you think about, I guess not how necessarily they're portrayed in popular culture since, a few years ago, the Fantastic Mr. Fox, who made it? Wes Anderson.
Yeah.
Based on the Roald Dahl book of the same name, with George Clooney as the Fantastic Mr. Fox. I mean, that presents the fox as a noble hero who's just trying to do the best by his animal neighbors. But the fox, historically in culture, he's sly, he's cunning, and
Elusive.
He's elusive, and he preys on the weak and defenseless.
Yep. And that's actually what I wrote down in sort of like a tentative answer to my question on my own pad of paper was foxes are cunning, they're quick, they're elusive, they're predators.
Yeah.
Of some animals, at least.
So, I mean, I totally get why Jesus would call Herod a fox.
I just have had fun, like, imagining, like, how he says fox, though. Like, is it with condemnation? Is it with sort of, like, the way a parent talks about their kid when they've been bad? Like, oh, he's such a fox sometimes.
Or it's a little weasel.
It could be.
Yeah.
Or I have to wonder what the original Aramaic word that Jesus would have used here, how it specifically translate. Would it translate directly to fox, or is it perhaps a transliteration? Could it also be like perhaps mangy cur?
I don't know.
Maybe Jesus is saying that Herod's like a worthless rabid mutt that needs to be put down. I don't know.
Yeah, but then how does that go along with, Jesus wanting to be a hen later on in the scripture? He wants to gather his brood under his wing. Like, does that really...
That's a good point.
Does that really fit?
That's a good point, because, I mean, you think about fox in the hen house. Jesus is protecting his chicks from the fox.
Oh, dang. I hadn't even thought about that connection.
Yeah.
Oh, dang. Okay.
Yeah.
Is that where that saying comes from?
From Luke 13, I don't think so.
Oh, okay.
But
I had not even thought about that. Okay.
But yeah, I mean, and that could just be something I'm reading into it, culturally speaking.
Sure, but I mean, back then, like, fox, like, I don't think things have changed so much in 2,000
years. In terms of chicken raising? No.
In terms of evolution, like, foxes would have hunted hens back then, too.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And then we didn't have like hen houses and stuff like that and big fences to protect them necessarily. It would be up to the person, the farmer, who employed to guard them.
Or if they had like a guard dog or something.
Yeah.
And they probably did have some sort of rudimentary hen house, just not quite as advanced as we have today.
It just occurred to me, we don't hear a lot about dogs in the Bible. The only instance I can think of is when Jezebel's thrown out of the wool and she's
and
eaten
dogs,
by...
and also the Syrophoenician woman talking about how talking to Jesus about how the dogs get the scraps from the table.
Right.
But I mean, that first dog reference, that's all the way back in 2 Kings. So.
Do you think they were more wild back then, or do you think they were domesticated?
They certainly weren't then what they are now.
Yeah.
I mean, over the last couple centuries, we have radically changed dog breeds. Like German Shepherds 200 years ago, a very different, much less aggressive dog than they are now, because they have been trained from being sheep herders to trained and bred from being sheep herders to being basically guard dogs and attack dogs. Tactical dogs, if you will.
Yeah.
And that's what they get used for. Although I've known some very kind and gentle German Shepherds in my time.
Oh, yeah.
So
a lot of it's upbringing and training.
Oh, yeah. And, that's the same with any breed. We could easily have trained Albus to be an asshole. Although I don't know. He's got such a gentle, mild temperament.
Yeah, but I mean, the theory goes you can train any dog.
Sure.
To be mean,
Sure.
But most dogs don't come out of the womb mean.
But foxes definitely have that wild streak to them that you wouldn't see in a dog. And
because we haven't domesticated and bred them for 1,000 years.
Even foxes that are in domestic captivity from the time of birth, they still have a wild streak to them. Because it's just their nature to be a predator.
Yeah.
To be kind of a scavenger almost. Not quite like a hyena, but let's just say that Jesus is not paying Herod a compliment by calling him a fox.
Oh, well. So much for the weird undertones we were going to explore.
Yeah. Sorry, Ted. This is not Zoolander Jesus edition.
So here's something I'm asking, because I was reading yesterday, and I can't remember if I figured it out or not, but is he actually in Jerusalem during this conversation? Or is he just close to Jerusalem?
Let me look at the pericope that comes before this and see if it tells.
Because this is after... Actually, I have... So just a little peek behind the curtain, I found out what scripture we were reading about an hour and a half ago. So so I have not had time to do as much research as I usually do. But is this right after John the Baptist is killed?
No, this is sometime after John's death. No, looking at Luke 13 before this passage, he had been teaching and doing miracles while he was on his way to Jerusalem, so it doesn't specify if he's in Jerusalem yet or not.
And if I guess the Pharisees could really be anywhere.
No, because so something that I was thinking about earlier.
Yeah, and John the Baptist was killed in Luke 9.
Okay.
So
no, something I was thinking about is that he is not at all, or if he's scared or worried about Herod actually doing something to him at this point in time, he's not showing it. And he says, go tell that fox for me, listen, I'm casting out demons and performing cures today and tomorrow, and on the third day I'll finish my work. Yet today, tomorrow, and the next day I must be on my way, because it's impossible for a prophet to be killed outside of Jerusalem. So I just think that's interesting. That's why I asked the question, is he currently in Jerusalem right now? Because he both refuses to give in, and yet he's also expressing but I also value my life, and I'm out of here. I'm gonna do my work and get stuff done. But I'm also not gonna be stupid, and I'm taking off.
Well, or does he also know that the seat of power of Rome is in the area is Jerusalem, and since they're the only one who can technically order corporate, the death penalty,
right?
That he would have to be brought to Jerusalem,
right?
Even for a sham trial that would then
in order to be condemned.
Yeah,
but at the same time, Rome's arm is really long. Even if he's outside of Jerusalem, who says that they can't capture him?
They could easily capture him, but the question
they care enough to do it?
Outside, he's not near the seat of power. Now, for what it's worth, 4 chapters later, in Luke 17, it says he's still on his way to Jerusalem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so he's getting close.
Yeah. And I'm guessing he is on his way to Jerusalem up until the triumphal entry, which is still several weeks away.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And I do enjoy that it's the Pharisees that warn him, because I don't know, it's not in the Gospels. It's hard to find a passage where they're actually seem to be cooperating or seem to be in, like, hey, just so you know, Herod is apparently doesn't like you.
The Pharisees were not opposed to Jesus as a united front. Like Nicodemus was a Pharisee. Joseph of Arimathea was a Pharisee. Paul was a Pharisee, although he had some issues before he got knocked on his ass. But
it's also still did, but we won't go there.
Paul was a Pharisee till the day he died. Let's be real.
And also, a lot of the anti-Pharisee talk comes from the time of the apostles after Jesus' death, not necessarily from the time from that period.
Right.
And so it's
that's true.
In the very next. Like, after this passage ends, Luke 14, verse 1 says, on one occasion, Jesus was going to the house of a leader of the Pharisees to eat a meal on the Sabbath. Mm-hmm. So, one of my coworkers is a Orthodox Jewish woman. Mm-hmm. And I've talked with her quite a bit about Jewish traditions, in large part because she and I are trying to convince her rabbi, who is currently an Army chaplain, to come to the blue side of things and be a Navy chaplain, although he's getting ready to deploy to Afghanistan, so that's probably not going to be anytime soon. But she and I have talked about the Sabbath a few times, and she says, if you get invited to Sabbath meal with a church leader, that's not a small thing. Mm-hmm. So for Jesus to be invited to the house of a leader of the Pharisees to eat a meal on the Sabbath, obviously they respected him. At least some of them did.
Yeah.
So I can definitely see them coming to say, hey, listen, Herod wants you dead, so you might want to tone it down.
Yeah.
Not to mention which, there is the part where Herod having somebody executed would kind of make Rome be like, beg pardon?
Excuse me.
That's our job? No. And then bad things would happen to everybody.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, little self-interest, sure, but maybe there was some respect there as well.
Do you think Jesus actually, this passage, I will keep driving out demons and healing people today and tomorrow, and on the third day I'll reach my goal? Mm-hmm. Is he talking about getting to Jerusalem? Is this something that the author, Luke, inserted to foreshadow the resurrection?
Oh, I'm sure this is literary.
You don't think it was just a coincidence?
No, I do not. I think it's about as much a coincidence as Jesus saying, I will tear down this temple and on the third day build it again.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I don't know. You're the one preaching on this tomorrow. What are your thoughts on the whole matter?
Yeah. Why don't you just give us your sermon, Caitie?
Yes.
This will be released after you preach.
Yeah, so. I mean, you're preaching tomorrow. This is going to be released till next Thursday, so.
No, I mean, so I've been going back and forth about this because I'm preaching at a church that is not my church. It's actually Jimmy's church.
My church.
And
Bailey asked her to do it.
Kind of upon first glance, for me, it's hard to not preach this and make it about politics. Like it's, I have when I first came to it, I'm not in that place anymore. Mm-hmm. I feel like I've kind of come around to this, but I don't know. I think there's something here about how we manage fear, in that Jesus has this idea put in his head that, while he's doing his work, somebody could just come up behind him and grab him.
Yeah.
Somebody could come up behind him and stone him. Mm-hmm. And yet he's like, no, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. Thanks. Yeah. I'm not dumb. I'm going to take off, but I'm going to do what I need to do until I feel like it's finished. Like my work in this particular place is finished, and then I'll move on to the next place. And I think there's something to learn from that. And I also feel like there's something to be learned too about the fact that Jesus is being threatened with death, but he immediately starts comparing himself to a mother hen. Like, he chooses love in the face of people trying to basically drown him in fear. Or, I don't know what the Pharisees' motivations were. They may have legitimately been trying to warn him, because like we said, like, Pharisees are cast in a bad light, kind of after the fact. But he's choosing love. He's like, if y'all would just let me love you, I would, but you won't. Yeah. And to me, there's a lot to be preached on there. We pray for political figures. Like, a lot of churches, like, that's always part of the pastoral prayers, that you pray for the people in power. And for me, a lot of times the elephant in the room is that a lot of us doubt, like, whether or not praying for people in power who maybe aren't using their power well, if it does any good. But at the end of the day, we're still praying, and we choose to pray for people who have power to wield. And we keep doing that, knowing that the door could be cracked to their hearts and things could change. Yeah. Like, we hold on to that idea.
And even if it's not, Jesus still told us to pray for those who persecute us.
Right. Right. And that's what he's doing. Like, I just keep picturing, like, current cities of power, or like any kind of, not just like Washington, D.C., but any city or major urban center in this day and age where people are either encouraged, or for purposes of survival and succeeding in the world, they have to put on masks, like masks that say that I'm tough, or masks that say that I'm independent and I get my shit done on my own and I don't need anybody. Jesus is
any woman who works in the banking industry in Charlotte, probably.
Jesus is wanting to take all of these people who put on tough exteriors and say, "Let me love you," but they won't. But yet he keeps wanting to love them anyway. Yeah. So that's, I don't know if any of that's...
Well, I mean, if you think about it, it's why when William Barber was doing the Moral Mondays a couple years ago, he kept going to Raleigh and he kept getting arrested, but he kept going back. He didn't let the political powers that be dissuade him from trying to extend a message of love to the people of North Carolina and beyond. He kept going back, and they kept arresting him. I mean, my God, how many times has that man been arrested at this point?
Oh my gosh, so much.
And, so for him, it's more like Raleigh, Raleigh, the city that kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to it. But that didn't deter him.
Right. So I just saw this question a while ago. So let me ask this question. So I said earlier, I hadn't thought about the connection between foxes and hens.
Sure.
And he's calling Herod the fox. He did, and again, we might be overanalyzing this. He didn't mention wanting to take a fox under his, like, motherly wing. He just wants to take the hen. So are the foxes included?
I don't know. He's probably still pretty irritated with this fox for executing his cousin.
It also could just be, it's one of those things where it's like, I'm the mother hen who takes the chicks under her wing, and someone might bring that up and he's like, well, that's where this metaphor kind of breaks apart. It doesn't quite work on every level.
Because a fox is going to eat a hen. Like a hen can try to but that wing's going to get snapped off before the wing even makes it around.
Let's also be clear about something. He says, I desired to gather your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings. He does not specify who is and is not in that brood.
Right. No, that's fair.
So
that's a good point.
It's an inclusive brood.
Fair enough.
There you go.
And maybe...
I mean, it's not a...
Maybe he has tranquilizers for the foxes. I don't know.
And none of the metaphors work perfectly. I mean, when the parable of the woman who lost the silver coin and swept her house, and God's obviously the woman, and the silver coin is the lost soul, and then she finds it, and then she invites all her friends over. It's like, who are God's friends? Like, are there other deities? Like, no, it's just a metaphor. Right. It's not a perfect, exactly. Yeah. It's to illustrate a point. It's not a perfect analogy.
And I mean, Jesus does get into that a few times. Like, why are you parsing this? Yeah. That is not the point.
Yeah. It's like, stop it, Marvel fans. God dang it.
Yeah. Stop worrying about how the Lightspeed drive gave Carol Danvers her powers and just accept it.
I don't care what year this song came out and Captain Marvel is it this year, like, blah, blah, blah. It's just enjoy the movie.
Look, and you can easily justify the usage of that Nirvana song. It is not that hard to do.
She heard it on the radio.
I distinctly remember that song getting heavy airplay in 1995. I distinctly remember it. And you know what? She was on Earth for several days. She probably heard it, and maybe she was like, damn, this Kurt Cobain boy can go places. And little does she know, that's going to be the big thing that breaks her heart when she comes back to Earth in Endgame. Not the fact that Nick Fury got dusted. No, it's the fact that Kurt Cobain is dead.
I just got into grunge.
Well, good news for her. Dave Grohl is still alive and making songs with the Foo Fighters.
And or was it when Winter Soldier came out and Steve Rogers has the list of things he needs to catch up on in popular culture, and one of them is Star Wars. And it's like, but Samuel L. Jackson plays Nick Fury. And it's like, it's like Arnold Schwarzenegger's The Last Action Hero. Someone else played Mace Windu. It's voila, problem solved.
Stan Lee in Captain Marvel. You know what? I'm not going to go there. Because that one, you got to see Captain Marvel to really appreciate that particular cameo. But let's just say,
welcome back to Libations and Marvel.
Like little girl.
What do y'all think? So, what do y'all think of? Because these are the verses I feel like I haven't focused on as much, but they're part of the passage. That verse 35. See, your house is left to you. What do y'all hear in that?
Nice. Verse 35. Oh, look, your house is left to you desolate. I tell you.
Oh, what version are you reading?
NIV.
Okay,
NIV.
We're reading NRSV.
Yeah, I don't have desolate.
So mine says, look, your house is left to you desolate. I tell you, you will not see me again until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord.
It's the rapture.
Yeah, there's the only explanation. End podcast.
You will not see me until your pants are left behind.
You'll not see me until there's a pile of clothes sitting on the driver's seat of your wrecked car.
No, really. Haven't you ever seen these videos where people are playing pranks on people and they just lay their clothes out, their pants are just laying on the floor.
I like was it American Dad Christmas episode where the rapture happens. But he's left behind, and then it goes. Anyway. If you like American Dad, it's very good. He goes to church, and
I haven't watched American Dad in like 14 years.
He can't get into the church because it's so crowded with people that just show up on Christmas Eve or whatever. And so him and his wife end up having sex in one of the rooms off the church, and then they come back and there's just clothes in all the pews, and everyone's being raptured up to heaven, but he's being left behind. And he's trying to like charter a helicopter. He's like, I've got to get up. And I'll just grab onto somebody floating up. I don't know. John Goodman can't be that high yet.
Jesus. Wow.
American Dad is actually probably the best Seth MacFarlane show, but that's probably because he has the least to do with it.
The Orville is the best Seth MacFarlane show.
Well, that's just I wish they had just given him the Star Trek license. I think we've talked about this on this podcast before.
We have, yes. But that has nothing to do with the house being left desolate.
Anyway.
Yeah, if y'all could see my face, I don't like Seth MacFarlane one bit. I think we won't go there. Yeah, back to the house being left desolate.
So, I tell you, you will not see me until the time comes when you say, blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. You know, interesting. In not the Quran itself, but in some of the post-Quranic writings, it talks about how at the end of days, Jesus will return, and everyone will bow before him and say, blessed is the one who comes in the name of Allah. Now, I mean, Jesus is a big deal for the Muslims.
Yeah.
You know, not the Son of God, but still a highly revered prophet who signals the return of the Lord to earth. I mean, Christians, Muslims, you're not that different.
Yeah.
When I was doing some scribbling yesterday around this, and I was reading about everything that happened in New Zealand, I feel like in the last few years, there have been a lot of instances of Muslim communities doing really tremendous acts of good in the face of like tremendous evil, and even for the benefit of people who don't care for them and are even prejudiced against them.
Sure.
And I kept kind of thinking, like, hopefully, not even hopefully, just more like knowing that the community in New Zealand, the Muslim community in New Zealand, and then other Muslim communities, they're going to continue being who they are.
Yeah.
And the majority of Muslims are incredibly loving, peaceful people. And for me, there's no doubt in my mind they're going to keep being that. And those communities are going to figure out how to a way to express love in the face of so much hatred and fear. Yeah. And I kept thinking about that in connection to this passage yesterday.
Well, so you mentioned that every time a Coptic Christian church gets attacked in the Middle East, the next Sunday there's always a ring of Muslims around it protecting the worship service. When the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh was attacked last fall, the Pittsburgh Muslim community raised a huge amount of money to help the Jewish community out. And interestingly enough, after the attacks on the mosques in Christchurch, the rabbi of the largest synagogue in Christchurch said, "We will not hold services today, not out of fear for our own security, but because this is not a day to celebrate the Sabbath, this is a day to mourn." So, it's... Even when the house is left desolate, the other people around the house say, "Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord." So yeah, it's interesting to put those in connection with one another. I don't know. It almost seems like the Muslim and Jewish communities that are doing the reaching out, and I'm sure Christian communities do the same amount of reaching out in times of crisis. It's not as easy to see sometimes. Maybe that's because so much of the larger Christian community has so thoroughly corrupted the gospel. And I don't know, they're the foxes.
Yeah.
Maybe, yeah.
I thought it was interesting you read it that way, because see your house is left to you, the way I read that is like, Jesus is not going to force himself on people.
Right. No.
If he's like, you're not interested in engaging with me, you're not interested in me loving you and healing you and doing all of these things, cool. But your house is desolate.
Yeah.
But that's your choice. I'll let your house be desolate if that's what you choose.
It's your choice to accept it, but whether or not you do, the symbol of God functions.
Oh, geez, Jimmy. No. Can you please speak to like the general populace and not just
deep baseball?
I'm speaking to like 90% of the audience of this podcast.
If you ever want to expand it, you got to.
Do you want the audience to grow? Like, you speak to the general populace.
They can read Elizabeth Johnson.
Oh, Jimmy.
She Who is not that hard to read.
Just so y'all know, this is the argument Jimmy and I have all the time about this podcast. I'm like, can you please just speak to normal people and not just our weekday folk? Like,
in the words of Eric Cartman, "It's my podcast that you don't want."
Okay, fine.
And with that, in the span of 30 seconds, I went from master's level divinity work to South Park.
Yes.
Yay!
Hey, South Park is deep. Not scripture level.
Not scripturally. Sometimes they seem to be phoning it in, but
and sometimes it's all about fart jokes.
Yeah, exactly. I was actually discussing that. So when Jimmy sent me the passage for today, I was having breakfast with my wife, and I was reading to her and discussing it a bit because she had a couple questions. But one of them was I was talking about like the Jerusalem, you kill the prophets and stow those who are sent to you, yada yada yada. And I was like, this seems like what all the Old Testament prophets have to say. Dear people of Israel, you've turned your back on Yahweh, turn back to God or you will be smited. You kill all the prophets that come to you, because apparently that's just a tradition in Jerusalem. But anyway, she was like, oh, and like that's interesting. I was like, yeah, but in the Old Testament, it was usually in reference to the leaders. The leaders were the ones who were breaking their way with Yahweh. It didn't matter what the populace was doing. It mattered what the leader was doing. And the people would be punished for what their leader did. Mm-hmm. Do you think it's the same today still? Are we held accountable for what our leaders do?
I mean, do you think people judge Christianity based on what chuckle nuts like Paige Patterson and Jerry Falwell do?
Hell yeah.
Because I'm pretty sure they do.
Well, even I was thinking in the political realm, because back then, the people of Israel, if we take what the prophets say is true, that the invasions of Assyria and Babylon were retribution for the kings or whatever turning their back on Yahweh, it seemed like the people were punished for that, but they didn't get to choose who their king was. But today, we choose who, especially in democracies, we choose who our leaders are. And so are we not more accountable for what our leaders do?
Well, damn, Ted. Yeah, we are.
We might have to edit the podcast, because I think we might need to think about this for a second.
And let's take a break for commercial break right now.
And we'll be right back. And we're back. So we're back. Talking
Wasn't that a great ad, everyone? Wow, what a wonderful product. I hope everyone goes out and buys.
Squarespace.
Lisa mattresses.
Third Love bras. Give me money.
Come on, you can throw that podcast and ad money around. Let's go.
Hey, I've actually bought a Third Love bra, okay?
I'm not saying
I haven't heard ads for that one.
Quip toothbrushes. How about that?
There we go.
Wait, you haven't heard any ads for Third Love bras?
No, I've heard Mac Weldon. I actually bought some clothes from them.
Mac Weldon?
It's a clothing website. All their clothes are antimicrobial.
No, like every freaking podcast I listen to, it's Squarespace and Third Love and Casper mattresses. Anyway, so Ted kind of fucked with our minds a little bit by saying, if the people of the monarchical Israel were held accountable for their leaders' actions, should we not, as the people of a democratic republic, be even more accountable for the actions of the leaders we put into place? And it's an intriguing question.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about people like, say, the old racist from North Carolina who died a few years ago. What was his name?
The only thing that comes to mind is Strom Thurmond.
That's what I'm thinking of. That's South Carolina. Yeah. Strom Thurmond. I mean, I think the people of South Carolina absolutely should be held accountable for electing him to Congress for over half a century.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, what the hell? This is a dude who actively fought desegregation, who actively fought the passage of the Civil Rights Act, and until the day he died was unrepentantly racist. Yes, South Carolina should be held responsible for him. South Carolina should also be held responsible for Mark Sanford and Nikki Haley and Lindsey Graham, but,
But that's what you think. The question is, what does God think?
Sure, that's fair.
And if we are taking account that disasters and problems hit any country with that, how many hurricanes and the freezing cyclones that we just had? We seem to have a lot of natural disasters befalling us. But then again, I'm sure you can find that at any time,
I'm
no matter who the leader is.
I'm pretty sure those natural disasters are us being held accountable for being anti-environmentalist assholes.
That is entirely possible, yes.
Well, and I mean, so I'm thinking back to how God actually held countries and cities and groups of people who raised up the wrong leaders accountable. And they wrote about exactly what you just said, natural disasters. But back then, there was a deep, they had no protection from the natural elements, not in the same way we do now.
Yeah.
So that was anger, wrath on the part of God. Yeah. So if that's how they experienced God's wrath, and that's how they felt God's judgment, what is God's judgment now? When do we know we're being judged by God? Are we being judged by God? Or, according to the passage, Jesus let them leave their house desolate. Is God just stepping back and saying, well, this is y'all's house?
Yeah.
Yeah.
On your own.
I mean, like, if y'all want to desolate yourselves, cool. Yeah. I mean, it's not what I want, but it's your choice. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, we're talking about two different perceptions of God here. We're talking about Old Testament God, and we're talking about like, Jesus is like showing us the new way.
And then I guess we would ask, did Jesus change it over from national responsibility to individual responsibility, and where do we see that in the Bible?
I don't think he changed it over to individual responsibility. I think he changed it over to communal responsibility. Mm-hmm. Not just a nation, but a community of people. You know, you are responsible for what you as a community do. And, you know, this guy in New Zealand, actually, he was Australian. Let's make that clear. He was a white nationalist from Australia. And his community, I imagine, will hold themselves responsible out of a certain feeling of guilt for not seeing this in this person and preventing him from being worse than he was. Or no, not making him be better than he was. That's fine. You know, and eventually the greater world community of people who have somehow deluded themselves into thinking that only white is right, they will be held accountable in some way or another, whether there's another Nuremberg trials or whether it's just when they reach, you know, the day of judgment and God is like, the fuck, dude?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And does it come into, I guess, the concept of punishment after death? Or
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
An argument I had many a time in divinity school with people.
I don't think you're going to stop having that argument because you're
until we die and we find out for sure.
You're being ordained in possibly the only church with a greater diversity of theology than the Christian Church, Disciples of Christ. The United Church of Christ and its 4 very distinct traditions. Good luck.
Yeah, about that.
Woo! Oh, well.
That's if you don't count all the minor denominations that also joined up, but are not representing the 4 traditions.
Right.
At least you're not part of a church that voted to make things tougher on its gay clergy.
Yes, that is true.
But that will remain nameless because we talked about that last time.
I actually think I only know one person still in that tradition, and... My foot. Sorry, that was my foot.
I thought it was the dog.
I thought it was the dog, too.
I only know one person left in that tradition, and they aren't from divinity school. It's actually from undergrad. But yeah, it's funny because I knew a lot of them, and then they all left.
They all left.
Well,
strange that.
the only person I can think of who was in that tradition, still seeking ordination until recently, has now said, you know what, I like the Moravians better.
Yeah.
So, although there was one person who graduated a year ahead of me who just got approved for ordination as a teaching elder in the United Methodist Church. So
I went to a Methodist college, so I still know lots of Methodists.
Oh, okay, you do, yeah.
Yeah, you do. And a friend of Caitie's was actually just here with her fiance a couple weeks ago. And after they left North Carolina, they were headed to St. Louis to, as they put it, watch the United Methodist Church burn itself to the ground.
Hooray!
Yeah, but that's actually not how I heard my friend describe it. There was,
That's exactly what she said. Those were the words she used.
Yeah, but that wasn't all she said.
No, it's not. But she still used those exact words.
Right, but she also talked about how there was also a lot of love and support, and there were spaces there.
Oh, sure.
Where people felt safe with each other and were...
I do think that sooner rather than later there's going to be a separate American United Methodist Church.
Probably.
Yeah. We also said we weren't going to go down this road.
Well, actually, I was going to change the pivot because I was talking with some Quaker friends about this recently.
Ooh, Quakers.
And they brought up when a similar debate happened in the Episcopal Church of America and then the Anglican Communion. And because I used to be Episcopalian, they're like, so how did they get through it? I was like, they did the most Anglican thing possible, which is they just did nothing and hope that time would figure it out, which is what the Anglican Church always does, which is they make very few pronouncements, and then they hope that either A, it will like female ordination, it will just blow over, or B, there'll be another schism, which is actually how the Methodist Church first came about, was a schism with the Church of England. So,
and the International Anglican Communion is seriously pondering booting the Episcopal Church USA and replacing them with the American Anglican Church.
But I think, and if tradition is anything else, they could just wait for 40 years and see if it all blows over.
Which it will. I mean, 40 years from now, let's be real. Not the next generation, but the generation after that is going to be looking at our generation, actually not our generation, our parents' generation, and being like, what in the hell was wrong with you people? And I would hope to God that 40 years from now, being gay or transgendered or a non-heteroconformist sexuality is a non-issue. I mean, it should be a non-issue now. But if it's not in 40 years, we are doing something very wrong.
Yeah, and it's just the passage of time when we become the old folks in whatever denominations we are in. We will be looking at the young people like, oh, I don't know if I trust the whatever topic of the day, and we will be the ones with our heels in the sand, and then they will look at us stupidly, and then 50, 70 years later, they will be the old people being dragged through the sand as well. And it's just a process. Everyone becomes old and becomes crotchety and doesn't like change.
All right. Young people of the year 2059 who have just happened to stumble across this podcast and are listening to it on your Verizon T-Mobile Sprint neural implant, you have my permission to say, hey, old man, you were doing the same thing as us 40 years ago. Back off.
Jimmy, by then everything will just be United States of Disney Corporation. That's how everything will be owned.
So that's Disney's next conquest now that they have Lucasfilm, Marvel, and 20th Century Fox. Next up, 1600 Pennsylvania.
Soon they'll just be able to buy whatever they want.
President Bob Iger, 2024.
Yeah. I don't know. I was just sorry. I was actually trying to look up how to pronounce a name.
There'll be posters of Big Brother is watching, but it'll be Mickey Mouse. Big Brother.
I'm watching this. I see what you're doing. Your TV with the camera never turns off. Remember, kids, report your neighbors if you think they're being anti-state.
Disney, if you'd like to send us money.
I'm George Orwell. I did put a lot of gin in these, didn't I?
Yeah, we could use some more.
Oh, Lord.
Ted, you saw the bar. We've got quite the selection.
That is true.
Katie, I think you were going to say something before I started imitating Mickey Mouse.
I don't know that it's relevant after that. No, I was just thinking about the fact that I get the weekly emails from Richard Rohr in the Center of Contemplation and Action.
Yeah.
And there's always a meditation like for the beginning of the day. And this last week, I was trying to. I always screw up the pronunciation of this name, and I was trying to look it up and figure it out, but couldn't find what I needed. But I'm just gonna butcher it.
Do it.
Teilhard de Chardin. How do I say it?
Deschardins.
Yeah. He was kind of summarizing and talking about a lot of what his philosophy was, and one thing that he talked about this last week was the fact that anytime a culture starts shifting to be more nuanced and complex, there's going to be pushback, which was a nice reminder, because I think we forget that, because the more time passes, like, we forget about these previous times in history where things were complicated then, and there was a lot of pushback, and there was a lot of hatred and a lot of fear.
Yeah.
So it's kind of comforting.
Well, and also always looking back on time, especially time periods you didn't live through, it's easy to be like, oh, it was so simple back then.
Because history books made it.
Well, history books make it sound simple, and there isn't enough time to go into the depths of the complexity of that day.
Right.
So you have a very simplistic view of the past.
Well, and a couple months ago on MLK's birthday, his daughter tweeted, in case you're wondering, just before my father's death, right around the time he did the Drum Major for Justice sermon, a national poll found him to be the most hated man in America. 70% of Americans said that Martin Luther King Jr. was, the most hated person in the country. That was right before his death. Now, 50 years later, we put him on a level with the saints, as we should. Yes, he was a human. He had his foibles. He cheated on his wife, but he did an unspeakable amount of good for equal rights in this country. But he was despised for doing it. And anytime there is a shift in the culture, whoever is at the vanguard of that shift is going to be despised for doing it. It's why people like William Barber and Nadia Bolz-Weber, and to an extent Bernie Sanders, they are despised by a large part of the culture. William Barber represents, the black culture of the South, saying not just enough is enough, but we are here at the table with you, whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
Nadia Bolz-Weber represents women of Christianity saying, we are your equal, whether you like it or not. Bernie Sanders, who personally, I don't think he has any business running for president again, but he has revolutionary ideas that have inspired some incredible young people to become part of the public sphere. And he is standing there saying all people are the same, whether you like it or not. This is not up for debate. You may not accept it, but this is truth. So, and those people are roundly despised by a significant part of the population. And 50 years from now, William Barber will probably be looked at much in the same way we look at MLK now. So it is helpful to remember that in times of cultural change, the people who are pushing the change for the better are going to be pretty well hated.
Yeah.
Just like Jesus was in 30 AD.
So what does it mean to be the one who comes in the name of the Lord?
I think that means being the one who comes in the name of the Lord means that you're going to be hated. And then 50 years later, people will be saying, blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. So, on April 4th, 1968, April 4th, 1968, MLK's house was left desolate. 50 years later, we say, blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. Think about that. Think about how rapidly the church expanded after Christ's death, resurrection, and ascension. And how in, say, 80, maybe 90 AD, there were probably people out there saying, blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord, who in the court in Rome would have been yelling, crucify him.
Yeah.
So that's just my spur of the moment, off the cuff interpretation of that particular end of the text.
I guess the question I'm asking myself is, does that time ever come? Because, to use what we've been talking about, the moment has arrived in history where MLK is now considered a saint. Now, granted, he's considered a saint because popular culture whitewashes him and doesn't talk about, what he had to say about poverty or the Vietnam War. We love to talk about Selma and all of that stuff because that's,
that's the safe part to talk about.
That's the safe part to talk about because, we're not like those racists back then, because, we can safely lift that up as a moment of justice work because we don't have that has nothing to do with us anymore. But by the time a culture has come to terms with something like that, we're already grappling with something else. We've moved on in this way, but we're still not with it. We're still struggling to say that, really the one who comes in the name of the Lord is everybody. Like, blessed is everybody, because...
Yeah.
Like, because, we can talk about the fact that everybody is struggling in some way to welcome someone. Mm-hmm. People in the LGBTQ community, there are members of the LGBTQ community who are gay or bisexual who just can't quite figure out how to welcome people who are transgender.
Yeah.
Like,
that is true.
We could talk about that. Like, as a culture, does that time ever arrive where we're done?
Well, there are people who were proudly part of first and second wave feminism who they look at trans women and they can't accept them as women. Mm-hmm. And it's like, feminism includes them.
Yeah.
And, I'm not really one to speak with authority on the feminist movement, as I am not a woman. But
and I'm not gay, and let me throw that back, go backwards in time by 30 seconds and say I'm not part of the LGBTQ community, so that is not me trying to critique it, because that's...
Sure. Like Fred Craddock once said, we are ones without authority. But, we can say that everybody deserves the same... Everybody deserves to be able to live their lives without somebody else telling them you're wrong. Mm-hmm. Regardless of what you might think of them, regardless of what your particular interpretation of 3 verses in Leviticus and Romans might say, everybody deserves the right to live their lives without somebody else telling them they're wrong. Everybody deserves the right to worship God in the way that they feel is the way God wants them to worship, with the exception of people who sacrifice other people. That's murder. But yeah.
Well, I feel like we're kind of wrapping up the conversation.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, if you want to watch an interesting video on the point that Jimmy was bringing up about transgender women who are not accepted in some feminist circles, a YouTuber called ContraPoints, who is a transgender woman, does a lot of very interesting videos on different topics, such as capitalism. Are Traps Gay was an interesting video she did. And she does one on this topic. I cannot figure out which one, because a lot of the titles of her videos do not necessarily pertain to the topic that she discusses.
Sure.
So she's kin to us, is that what you're saying?
Yes,
like, she goes off topic?
Yes, a little bit. But interesting, all the videos are just her, and there's multiple characters, but she plays all the parts.
Interesting.
It's very cool. She's a very interesting YouTuber. The only problem is that, unlike a lot of YouTubers, she can't, because she does it all herself, she can't put it out once a week. It's usually a month in between videos. But anyway, look her up. She has a lot of cool videos. And one that talks about this topic.
Well, we've reached the 67-minute point at this point. So I'm going to ask for final thoughts, and I'm going to start with Caitie, because she's waving her hand in the air like she just don't care.
Well, so since this is the Lenten season
of
libations and lectionaries, how does this tie back into Lent? We haven't really talked about. I mean, this is supposed to be the Lenten season. So what does this have to teach us in the season of Lent as we're journeying towards Jerusalem and Holy Week?
Maybe Jesus should have given up dying for Lent.
Oh God!
I think. Jeez. Without delving too deeply here into substitutionary atonement, I think the whole idea of Jesus dying on the cross, descending into hell if you're from certain traditions, and being resurrected is to wipe the entire slate clean and level the playing field for every person. And that is what we're journeying towards as we move through Lent. We are journeying towards a house being made desolate on Friday, and then on Sunday, Mary Magdalene running into a locked room full of piss-scared little boys and saying, "Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord."
I'm going to need to play that back and write notes on that, because that's going in my sermon somewhere.
All right. So I guess that's my final thought on the matter. How about y'all?
I don't know. I think I'm struck by the fact that, and again, maybe being too overly analytical about it, but he's doing the work but he's still going to head away from Jerusalem, and yet he's going to circle back. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I don't have an answer for why I think that's. I don't feel like I have the ability to speak about why I think that's relevant or why that's important, but maybe one of you does. Like, I just keep thinking about that. Like, he's being like, and again, like we can get into like historical analysis and like the fact that the writers knew the end game and all of that stuff, and like they wrote that into this. But at the same time, like thinking about the literal journey that led up to Holy Week and the fact that he gets close and he backs off and then he comes back in. Like I'm trying to figure out why I think that's meaningful.
I'm not sure.
Ted's just sitting here looking off into space.
Well, I was going to. What I was going to say is that I think that. I feel like I keep bringing up that I had arguments about stuff in divinity school, and then I use this as a platform to air those grievances. Because those people aren't on this podcast.
Welcome to the Festivus episode of Libations and Lectionaries. Next up, Feats of Strength.
Anyway, but the argument of whether Jesus knew that he was going to die or not. I thought he may not have known the time or the place, but I think this and other passages point to that he would have to have been a moron to not know that what he was doing was not going to lead to his death at some point, at the hands of the Romans or the hands of Herod or the hands of just a crowd stoning him to death. Like it was a matter of time, like not if but when. And so I think that he saw his work as so important that he was willing to face that inevitable end. Mm-hmm. And I think that is sometimes the work is more important than what our preferred ending or our preferred safety.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure he did. I mean, you think about it, every revolutionary prophet, they kind of imply that at some point. Again, going back to MLK's last sermon, he talked about after I'm gone. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then a month later, he was.
And then, and not even just the prophets we know about, but all the rural prophets of Jesus' time who were competing with him and come before him. They all end the same way, which is usually dead on a cross. Occasionally your head chopped off and put on a silver platter for irony's sake, I guess.
Yeah, John the Baptist was beheaded. Yeah. Peter was crucified upside down. Mm-hmm. Andrew was crucified on a diagonal cross, which now forms the basis of the Scottish flag and the Christian Church Disciples of Christ logo. I mean...
Well, and I guess what I'm trying to get at is, like, what does that mean for the every person? Like, what can we take from that? Like, for those of us who are not prophets, who are not William Barbers, who are
just the people listening to Jesus preach?
What does that mean for us?
I don't think you have to be William Barber to be a prophet.
No, absolutely not. Like, just because, like, suddenly, like, the world knows your name doesn't mean that you weren't a prophet before that.
I think there are plenty of prophetic voices of our time. I think Stephen Colbert, to a certain degree, is a prophetic voice because he is a man of deep faith. And that does very clearly influence the way he lives his life and the way he speaks in public. And he speaks in a very prophetic manner, even though, he is the host of a late night comedy show. He tends to get out there on stage at Radio City Music Hall and speak prophetically. Mm-hmm. So, I think prophets are where we may not expect them to be.
Sure, and what I meant by that question was more about, like, what does it mean to back off from a threat and yet to return to it somewhere else down the journey? Like, and I'm really thinking about if we're thinking about the Lenten season is from like Ash Wednesday to Easter, and like being the life's journey, the disciples' journey.
How about
like what is that? What can we learn from Jesus taking a step back, but then knowing when the moment is to return to Jerusalem where there's a threat?
To quote Nancy Pelosi, he's just not worth it. I bet. Yeah. I bet she's got a long game.
Let's hope.
Yeah. To know that there's nothing wrong with not going to going to the place of danger. There's a moment for that.
There's a time and a place for everything under heaven.
Yep.
All right. Well, we've gotten into some deep stuff. And we took the first mid-episode break in the history of the podcast.
Thank you,
Go
Ted.
us.
Yay! I broke the podcast.
Yeah, you broke the podcast, you bastard. So, Ted, since you did that, what are you enjoying in pop culture right now?
Okay, so I was looking it up, scrambling. So me and Lindsay, there's a new show on Hulu called Shrill. My wife Lindsay and I literally binge watched all the episodes of yesterday.
Okay.
It stars Caitie Bryant, and it's about a heavy girl who lives in, I think, Portland, Oregon, and her coming to terms and accepting herself for who she is and not feeling that she needs to do what society thinks she should look like.
Cool.
And it's very good. It's very well acted. It's very funny. And then, in addition to that, I don't think enough people are seeing Captain Marvel. It only made $500 million in one weekend. Go out and see it.
Oh, yeah.
And Disney, you can send my money to.
Right.
But besides that, not a whole lot. I'm going to, as I mentioned, going to the Ordination Council this week. So thoughts and prayers, please.
Oh, by the time this airs, you will have been and gone.
I mean, let's see. What have I been focusing on in pop culture?
I mean, we started watching season 3 of Queer Eye yesterday.
We did, and it is delightful as always.
And it is majorly pushing the nostalgia buttons for Caitie and me since we used to live in Kansas City. And we keep seeing places pop up that we're like, we know that place, we miss that place.
I know that street they're driving down.
That's the plaza. Wait, why are they going for a gondola ride on Brush Creek? That's kind of nasty. Yeah, okay, I gotta say this right now. The first episode where they went for a gondola ride on Brush Creek, you could not pay me to get anywhere near Brush Creek like that. That creek is disgusting. There are probably human bodies buried in the concrete. I'm not joking.
No.
The concrete bed of Brush Creek was built in the 40s and 50s when construction companies in Kansas City were largely controlled by a little organization known as the freaking Mafia. There are certainly dead bodies beneath Brush Creek.
Oh, they biodegraded by now.
They were in concrete. They have not done anything.
I worked right beside Brush Creek, and
yeah, so did I. You worked at Community Christian Church. I worked at the Intercontinental Hotel. We could both walk outside and see Brush Creek. Hard pass.
Yeah, not so much, but
the rest of it.
Yeah, but we miss Kansas City.
Yeah,
we miss Kansas City a lot. But other than that, I need to dig into a little book I borrowed from a friend on Hygge culture.
Hygge.
Hygge.
It's a Scandinavian, not hookah. It's a Scandinavian concept of coziness.
Yeah.
Of coziness?
Yes.
Is this just another book to throw away all your junk?
No. No, that's not what it is.
Like that lady on Netflix who's like, you should only have 10 books.
So in Denmark, they have a cult, Wow, okay, that was loud.
Hygge.
Hygge. Or actually, in the book they say, don't worry about how you pronounce it, because there's like 3 or 4 different pronunciations on it. But no, Hygge is about coziness and comfort and being with people who you care about. I read an article a while back, Hygge has just, the American culture has just become aware of this, and everybody's trying to turn it into an HGTV special that it's just about, how your house looks and, buying certain things to reflect Hygge. But Hygge is just about comfort and safety, and, for them, it's about, during winter, gathering your people around a fire and, making stew together and candles. It is about ambiance, but it's also about value, what you put your value in, what you value. So I need to read more about on Hygge, because I made an attempt at Hygge this past winter. I kept Christmas twinkle lights out on the mantle for a little bit of light. So anyway,
so for listeners who can't see the book like I can, it's written by the CEO of the Happiness Research Institute in Copenhagen. Is this Scientology? Blink twice if you need help. Blink twice.
Are you for real?
I don't know. Tell me when the space aliens show up in this. That
there are no
mind wash the spirits of people to watch a movie about Jesus. I think I vaguely remember.
Wow. Anywho.
So, I did go see Captain Marvel. I was one of the people last weekend. Yeah. Went and saw it at the Alamo Draft House in Raleigh.
Oh, nice.
It's not as good as the Alamo Draft House in Kansas City. I'm sorry. Kansas City Alamo Draft House is just my shit.
Well, I've only been to the one in Raleigh, but I enjoyed it. I enjoyed being able to order real food.
I enjoy it too. Yeah. I like the Alamo a lot more than, say, AMC or Cinemark or whatever. I guess Cinemark is part of AMC now.
Well, I will say a lot of AMCs now have the reclining seats, and the one in High Point has heated seats too.
Good for them.
Yes.
I still like the Alamo better. Anyway, so, it was not a groundbreaking great movie by any means, but I still really enjoyed it. I would not say it was on the same level as Wonder Woman, because Wonder Woman was like, seriously, I am woman, hear me roar.
Yeah.
That having been said, Captain Marvel does a hell of a lot better job with the Bechdel test than Wonder Woman does. Because, for those of you who are not familiar with the Bechdel test, it basically asks, are there two female characters in this movie who at some point have a conversation that does not involve a man? In Wonder Woman, never have. Well, actually, I take that back. The entire first act.
Oh, the first act.
On, what the hell is Themyscira?
The Greek
There are no men there. They don't care about men, although I guess they talk about Zeus and Ares plenty, and they're both portrayed as men in the movie. But, Captain Marvel, there's plenty of conversations between Maria Rambeau and Carol Danvers that have nothing to do with men. They have to do with, F-15s, among other things.
Well, I will say though that I do think Wonder Woman is a better film, but unlike Wonder Woman, Captain Marvel is not rotated around a love story.
That is true. There is absolutely no love story.
But I will, and Captain Marvel does not end with, oh, my boyfriend died, so I'm just going to stay in a museum for 90 years for some unexplained reason.
Yeah.
Which, since the DCEU is falling to pieces and they're getting rid of the Batman and Superman elements, I hope they just go, just kidding, rewrite.
That part of that movie was intended to help set up Justice League.
Yeah.
The rest of it was...
They could have just been like she was doing other stuff, and now she's showing up again.
Yeah, she was off saving the world.
Yeah.
But back to Captain Marvel. It was fun. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed finding out how Nick Fury actually lost his eye. That gave me a good giggle. And I'm not going to spoil it. If you want to know, you're going to have to go see it.
Yep.
And I, quite frankly, really enjoyed the fact that they went after multiple anti-woman tropes in this movie.
Yeah.
Like the motorcycle dude pulling up and telling her, you should smile. So she steals his motorcycle. Yeah. Jude Law being your typical internet bro. Debate me one-on-one. And she's like, no, screw you. Eat photon blast.
Yeah. I will say that... the de-aging effect on Samuel L. Jackson I thought was really good.
They did a lot better on him than they did on Clark Gregg.
Yeah. I looked at him, I was like, what is going on with his hair?
Phil Coulson was definitely in the uncanny valley.
He had a very bizarre pompadour, and he did not look...
Remember, it was 1995. We made some really questionable fashion choices in 1995, dude. I look at pictures of me in 1995, and I'm like, what?
Yeah.
So,
anyway,
it was a very enjoyable movie. Like I said, I am watching Queer Eye with Caitie, and that's where I'm at with pop culture right now. I also just started rereading Tom Clancy's The Hunt for Red October.
Ooh.
It's a good book. Yes, it's 35 years old, but it's still a good book. So,
I'm married to my dad.
Wow. Wow.
Oh, boy.
I'm sorry.
Oh, boy.
I'm sorry. It tickles me to no end that you and my dad read a lot of the same books.
We'll have a conversation about that later, I'm sure.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
In the meantime, I guess we'll be back in 2 weeks. So this episode will come out on March 21st. That'll be April 4th will be the next episode. April 4th.
Okay.
And on April 4th, we will talk about something else. Until then...
Something else.
Hey, that's the same thing I said at the end of last episode, and it's true. We will talk about something else next time. Until then, have a drink and read your Bible. Libations and Lectionaries is recorded and edited using Audacity open source audio editing software. I'm shipping up to Boston by the Dropkick Murphys was used under fair use guidelines for the purpose of providing a point of reference for commentary. Make sure to tune in 2 weeks when we'll talk about something else.